the Seventh-day Adventist pastor who was killed in the genocide. The congregation heard the order from the radio to cut down the tall trees. And I'm guessing that's referring to the rich people, right? That was the invitation to start the war. And immediately they became aware that Hutu militia was mobilized and coming to their villages. The entire congregation, and I'm reading the story that Mark Finley is telling. The entire congregation of about 60 sought refuge in the church building, where all of them were slain, but only 15 who managed to escape. Pastor Self, whose head was split open while holding his wife's hand, after which the same attacker hit her on the head and shoulder and partially amputated her hand. She was left for dead among the pile of bodies and discovered alive only 3 days later, when the rest of the villagers returned. What an unimaginable horror. Adele was slowly nursed back to health over a period of 3 years. Following her recovery, she made a choice to refuse that her husband's legacy be dishonored. She would go and minister to the same militia who killed him and almost took her life. As a result of a genocide, the new government built many prisons around the country to intern those found guilty. There was a prison near Adele's village, and that is where she went to give Bible study to the inmates. Not long afterward, a young man approached her and, falling at her feet, begged her for forgiveness. Chills ran down her spine. It was the same person who killed her husband and left her for dead. Adele did not hesitate to honor the supplication for forgiveness in her. So here are her own words. She said, Pastor Mark, she was talking to Mark Finley, one day a young man named Louis fell at my feet, and he was weeping and kissing my feet. And as I looked down at his feet, I saw that was the young man who rushed in with a machete and killed my husband. He was the young man who put this scar on my head. And he looked up at me and said, Adele, will you forgive me? I pulled him up and embraced him and said, in the name of Jesus, I will forgive you. She continued. Pastor Mark, my heart was racing, but I knew that Christ had forgiven me and that I could forgive this murderer. I began to study Bible with prisoners, and Louis came to the Bible studies. He made the decision to follow Christ and be baptized. So Louis said, before I am baptized, I want to stand before the prison publicly and ask you, Adele, for forgiveness. On the day of the baptism, he stood with Adele and said, Adele, I brutally murdered your husband. I put a knife mark, a machete scar on your head. Will you forgive me? She said, before those prisoners, before he was baptized, I forgive you. My son took his father's death so hard. And Louis said, I want to talk to your son. And my son went to his prison cell. And Louis said, I want you to forgive me. Louis became a model prisoner. And so if you think that the story ends here, no, it doesn't. The story continues. After relating her story to Adele continued to minister to the young man. Having become a leader, become a model prisoner, he was granted amnesty for good behavior. But the amnesty brought a problem of a different kind. The young man was an orphan. Having lost his entire family during the genocide, with nowhere to go, Adele shifted into a higher gear and adopted Louis as her own son. Adopting the one who murdered your husband. After relating her story to Pastor Finley, she offered to introduce her son to Pastor Finley. Pastor Finley was admittedly apprehensive at first, not knowing what to expect. At the introduction, he could not discern the murderer. Before him stood a man of admirable character, a sinner forgiven. My heart is broken for Ukraine, where people are slaughtered by Russian missiles and soldiers that came over. Today, justice and forgiveness rings loud in my ears. I do not talk to my own brother because we have some. And the reason is probably I'm assuming that he's not supporting Ukraine's defense. That Ukraine has. I am thinking that that's my rationale, that I think I am wrong. Some people in our society want justice, some want forgiveness. But none of us are objective and can fully provide either one except God. Love and hate are just one step apart. What if we changed this phrase into a different one? Love and hate are just Christ apart. How can forgiveness and justice live together? Because they are different. If you forgive, then you are not just. If you are just, then you are not forgiving. And I think we have an answer to the question, to this question: how can forgiveness and justice live together? In our next question. Remember earlier we asked a few questions. And there was a question: how can a murderer live in peace with a victim? And Adele example in Rwanda, where she lives with a murderer. She lives with a man who is forgiven. He is her son. And this is happening when Christ is the one who is in between that love and hate. Because we can run fast. We can go from loving a person into hating a person. In just it's never before. And I have witnessed in my life with the Ukraine conflict, especially in 2014, where my Facebook page, my friends have polarized over the revolution in Ukraine and the conflict in Ukraine. They have separated just really quickly into these two separate, different, how do you say, Hutus and Tutsis, right? They separated just like that in a moment. Love and hate are just Christ apart. So we have attempted to marry mercy and truth. to merge them. And I think we succeeded to rephrase our American saying that love and hate are Christ apart. If we have Christ, if we focus on